When I started on my own and I was sat in the attic of a house in Sheffield, and it was very much me on my own, but I had ambition to do many things. I just thought, what is the biggest word possible that could describe the space that our studio exists in? And that's where Universal Everything came from. I started it on my own 20 years ago and soon hit a wall of my own abilities, and that's when I started bringing people in. Because I was in Sheffield, not London, I didn't think to just shout down the corridor of the design studio and hire the animator or the sound designer or the programmer down the road. It was like, okay, this person in Japan's a fantastic programmer, let's work with them. And this person in America is a fantastic product designer, let's work with them. So it became this natural remote network of collaborators. From a creative process, I often have a seed idea, but I'm more and more excited to see how that seed of an idea can be grown into something way beyond I could have imagined by the people I work with.
I've known and worked with Matt for almost 20 years, so clearly I like to work with him. He identifies people who he thinks would work well as part of a collective. He just allows you to be you. That gives a sense of freedom to have a play and explore, whether it be visually or experientially. It's less about wanting people to do the best for you, the best for everything, but just to do their best or what they're best at. I think we all have the mental freedom to go off and do what we do and then come back together at certain points to make sure we're aligned.
So many times I see work out there that has a little plinth next to it explaining what you should do. And I think as designers and artists, you failed if you have to do that. The only thing that we ask people to give is their body and their attention, and we'll do the rest of the work.
It doesn't feel different to us working with a brand collaboration who fortunately give us a lot of freedom, and there's not really much compromise, to working on a museum collaboration. We're just doing what's from our heart, and it's all about the context that it lands in. To us, we're ultimately just thinking about the audience, really, and how the audience are very much part of our process.
The sweet spot for us, particularly in our more commercial work, is pushing the brands that we collaborate to be far more artful than they usually would be. As a consequence, I think they end up doing something new with us, or at least I hope that's how they feel. People they're speaking to, the audience, also feel that they've been pushed as well.
I always like the idea that these interactive experiences for public shows can bring strangers together. It's not necessarily you and your friend or you and your partner. It can be two people who don't know each other and suddenly they're connected in this metaphorical way. We're big fans of kind of democratizing what we do, and we have plenty of fantastic photography and footage of families using our work. And to me, that is more meaningful, appealing to young, curious minds, as well as this highbrow audience as well. I think that's a sign for us of the playfulness and joyfulness working.
Children are the best testers of all of this stuff, right? Because they have no mercy. They now have preconceived idea of what art should be, or that you should be quiet in a gallery. And that release that happens, and often starting with children and then spreading to other adults, I love seeing that.
Pretty much every interactive I've made, I get my kids to try it out because they're your harshest critic, and they'll tell you straight away if it's rubbish or they don't understand. You'll know if it's good because they'll keep asking you to do it again and again and again. So that repetition, which obviously kids love, they'll do something once, they'll do it 100 times if they like it. We are trying to design stuff for a universal audience. People can relax feeling that they don't have to be highbrow. We want it to feel like kids and grown-ups can play together and not feel silly. That is a really good outcome for us if that happens.
I think that mode of the childlike state is one that I love. And I think the most extraordinary art is the art that can transport you in that way and take you into the moment. And a salve to this modern world of agony and pain that we seem to find ourselves in. The aspect of playfulness, I think, is an important one, and ironically, we're very serious about that. And I think the way that the studio works in terms of making work that satisfies us and keeps our attention over the kind of long gestation, especially of these interactive works, is a great test, right? So if it still amuses us, if it still engages us after months or sometimes years of work, then it's probably going to do the same for a lot of other people as well.
We've discovered that, you may have someone who's naturally a performer and wants to do things in public, and then you might have someone who's more comfortable observing and they're enjoying just watching the show. Or you might have someone who thinks they're an observer but then actually ends up performing. And then you have someone else, it's probably their kid, who was the performer telling the mum what to do. So then they become the director. So there's this lovely kind of play of roles and theatre in it as well, which is very subtle, but that kind of encouraging people to take different roles and play in their own comfortable ways is kind of something that we bear in mind as well.
Another thing that is really key to the work we do is this element of randomization, so that every person's reflection on kinfolk, for example, is different. So some people might get a short, flat, grey-haired type of creature. Some might get an incredibly flamboyant peacock type of figure. I think that's another thing that we try to incorporate into a number of our works, is this element of surprise and randomization, because that's something that only technological software-based art can do. And then the playfulness side is certainly something that we're interested in terms of especially using technology and cold hard code to create random pieces of visual expression which are code driven, but they have a humor or a playfulness or an attitude to them, which is, I find fascinating, that a bunch of random numbers can turn into something that's funny.
Traditionally, an animator would have animated individual frames to create a kind of flip book. More recently, people use computers to animate, but they're still animating frame by frame, and they're controlling every single aspect of what that image looks like. With a generative process, we're giving some of this up to chance, essentially, to chaos, to a roll of the dice. And what this means is that every time people step up to one of these artworks, they're seeing something completely new. Each person will experience these pieces in a slightly different way to other people. But I think throughout the whole process, we're always thinking about the end user and how this content will make them feel. And that's part of the challenge with generative artwork. We don't want to simply leave the whole thing to chance. We do need to bring back in this layer of, human design, human curation, human control, that ensures that the end result is what that we intended and is something that people will relate to. We're not particularly concerned with photoreal graphics, with recreating the real world, but we are concerned with creating computer generated images that are so believable that they allow people to step into a world and believe in what they're seeing, if only for a moment. I think the sort of cameras and tracking technology will only get better so that we're able to more seamlessly incorporate people and their emotions and behavior into these types of experiences.
We work a lot with emerging technology, so there's a new body tracking camera that comes out, or there's a new graphics card that comes out that enables much higher fidelity of visuals or much more accurate tracking of the human body. So we sort of always tend to start by playing with how can we push this, and what are the edges of this technology. On one hand, it's really interesting and exciting to see how rapid the advancements and breakthroughs are. It used to be every year, and it's with AI especially, it's every month, every week even, that something has replaced something else. But I think we always keep going back to this core thing of us creating like human-based works, and it's kind of a fight between the primal human perception of things and this kind of like breakneck pace of technological innovation. We're sort of somewhere between the two, I suppose.
The human response that we have to colour is, again, a universal. There's something very special that happens when you get colours playing with each other, interacting with each other.
My thesis was on colour when I studied graphic design, and it's this idea that colour is the first thing that hits your eyes before anything else, so it's like a deliverer of emotion. So that vibrancy has always been something that's in our work as a way of kind of amplifying the emotions, perhaps. I've always been interested in many, many different things, in terms of aesthetics or mediums or subjects. So yeah, it certainly wasn't like, here's a business plan, we're just going to focus on this. And we've just sort of followed our heart on many, many different projects. And the figurative work we do now is like one small slice of what we do as a studio. It's a kind of a global language that you can display on any screen or any space in the world. We're known for it more and more, but we do many other things as well. We're always going to be interested in exploring many directions with many people.
What I've always loved about Matt Pike's work and Universal Everything's output is that it generally makes people feel good and positive, and it's not dystopian. That idea of inventing and things feeling positive and different and exciting and new, and we kind of want that to be reflected in our work. I think some of the works are probably more thoughtful than others. It's not interactive, generative film called Migrations, which is this collection of imaginary and semi-imaginary beasts walking infinitely into the kind of into the distance. And actually seeing that on the big screen the other day when we were testing it, I was like, oh, it's actually quite sad. Is it a mass exodus? Are they trying to escape from something? Are they looking for water? You do start planting stories into something which actually weren't pre-designed at all. But that's kind of nice because you're leaving it open for the audience to come up with their own narrative and their own stories. You just kind of plant little seeds for them to do it themselves. We're quite well known for a film called Transfiguration, which is an elemental character that is changing from smoke to fire to wood to diamonds over time. And we've always gone back to that kind of theme of this ever-evolving character. So we thought, why not try and make something interactive out of it where our audience is the character and they are evolving over time and they're developing these different kind of furry costumes and can move and dance and twirl and make these characters come alive.
I think everything we do has a kind of a human quality to it, I suppose. In We Are All Unique, what I did was I created first of all, composed some melodies, and then I went through and I sang all the different parts myself. I used a AI system to transfer my voice to like various different voices and create a choir from my voice but with different characters. In the piece Symbiosis, we wanted to create a world where you feel like you've shrank down into this raindrop or a bubble. That was one of the pieces that had to be like really real, like super real, like exaggerated. I recorded by putting the hydrophone into my pond in the garden and also burying contact microphones under the ground and trying to get the sounds of earth and insects and stuff like that. So that's one of those great examples of changing your sort of context from a kind of a human point of view to a kind of superhuman point of view where you can sort of look at things from another perspective that you wouldn't normally experience.
A lot of the stuff we reference is from nature, whether it's animals or plants or natural environments. And we do like this idea of things becoming and evolving and becoming more complex over time. But also most of the characters we have in our interactives in particular have a life cycle. So they do spawn and then they do die, like they collapse and start again. Interactive project we've got called Future You, where you have a 2-minute life cycle basically, and then that's it, you're done, you know, and then you're on to the next characters.
I think the most important thing is this idea that there's this primal cognition of and primal perception of like human movement or animal movement, and we're all tuned to perceive very subtle indications of human movement. That's something that we found really interesting in our work, where we create quite abstract forms and imagery using 3D software, but when you inject that with some human movement through motion capture software or data, even the abstract form, if it moves in a slightly human way, just on that edge of abstraction, that's when the soulfulness emerges and the abstraction comes to life and you sense that there's a soul inside it. There's a term pareidolia, which enables people to see faces in clouds or toast or whatever it is, and it's that primal thing of seeing two eyes and a face. You know, it just connects to people. So I think we're really just a newer generation tapping into that feeling.
This idea of what the body is something that is, well, universal, right? We've all got one in one form or the other, and I really do see our work as a studio as a continuation of that practice. I think the figurative is something that works because we are a design practice as well as working in the art context, is something that allows communication to happen because of that universality, right? That we've all got a body, and that motion, that movement of the body is something that can unite people across cultures, politics, everything else.
I think one thing that we're very protective of as a studio, and the way we're set up as a studio, we're very selective about what we do, and so we can do them really well and within reasonable hours with a reasonable amount of stress, and doing work that has a positive impact on people. As long as we stick with that and resist the growth through success, then I think we'll be okay.